All right, here we go. Let's share this to the group. This is the pregame share now to a group, and it's going to be Virtual Thursdays. All right, well, hello, everybody. Welcome to Virtual Thursdays Dire Literary Series for the last program of the summer. And I am sitting in front of the dilapidated photo of John's book cover because our feature is John Amen, and it doesn't have the title of the book. And I don't actually live here, but I wanted to tell you a little bit about John. And John and I go way back, almost 20 years. So let's talk a little bit about John here. There he is. And that's his newest book, Dark Souvenirs. And we'll probably be talking a little bit about that. And now about John, which, if my computer ever gets its shit together. There it is. John Amen is the author of 4 previous collections of poetry: Christening the Dancer, More of Me Disappears, At the Threshold of Alchemy, and Strange Theater. Finalist for the 2007 Brockman-Campbell Award. He is the co-writer along with Daniel Y. Harris of the new Arcana. His work has been translated into Spanish, French, Hungarian, Korean, and Hebrew. In addition, he's released 2 folk root CDs, All I'll Never Need and Ridiculous Empire. He founded and continues to edit the Pedestal Magazine. And there is his latest book, which is, in his next bio, Dark Souvenirs. And hey, John, how's it going?
Things are going pretty well, Tim. Thanks for having me on here. It's great to see you again and be on the call.
All right, so we're going to have you read for a few,
Okay.
and then we will do a Q&A. So we'll give us the best 7 minutes of your life.
Got it. Yep. Yeah, so I timed this. So if I don't say anything between poems, I should be able to fit this in. So I'm going to stick to the poems pretty much. All right, so this is the opening poem in the new collection, Dark Souvenirs. It's called Family Systems. 3 weeks after his bullseye shot, his cell phone kept dialing. Long, blank messages. I could almost hear the engine of his breath. He should have been the world's youngest maestro, but spent his years hiding in the valves of a West Side trumpet, blowing sparks, but no music, part he couldn't conjure once he inhaled. Finally, I answered, waited for the caller to begin his confession. Hope can nail your feet to a burning floor. Grief can smoke the dirt under your shoes. A month after my brother's funeral, spackled sky, red blooms on the gardenia. I could hear my father grinding his teeth from across the room. My mother stared out a window, whispering to herself, deciphering omens in the bird song. I told you 1,000 times, she blurted, crazy dervish spinning in my direction. Never hang a hat on a black doorknob. Now look, just look what you've done. There's a section in here of prose poems. I'm going to read one short one. This is called Apprenticeship. My brother and I memorized our parents' epic, their curses and grunts, mastering that pigeon of volatility. We can feel an earthquake rising in the slightest twitch of an eyebrow. Murder begins with a pinch of the lips. I swear, brood has a particular smell, fester as a sound, like an orchestra of snipers tuning in the dark. And this is the title poem from the book, Dark Souvenirs. I studied your craft, how you drove the demon of gluttonous age from its hiding place, freeing the infant who starved for 84 years, Tang and its host dismantled with a single twitch. Little mess, little cleanup, nail brush, toothbrush, soapy sponge. No mention in the real estate ad, the previous owner's impeccable marksmanship. No way to preserve your opus, air that still trembles, trying to catch its breath. Memory does its best to salvage a keepsake. Hulk, bullet, bone, a new constellation in the night sky. But symbols are lost. Art fails, except as it screams at the dead. I hope what remains of you can recognize my voice. I'll read one more. This is called Recovery. A hand stretches from deep space and taps you on the shoulder. You've been through this routine enough times that you no longer turn. You reach forward into hard light and bells. This is it, center stage in Shangri-La, your confession offered to the books. You elbow someone whom you vaguely recognize. He offers to modify his routine. He offers to perform the wedding. You stand on the deck of the Mother Louise, your return voyage through manic straits, watching the hull carve through waves, thinking you've revised the print. You're a new man with a new karma. But causality dissolves at this point. Each scenario occurs in a different room, even if all take place in a single beachfront tower fated for demolition. Goodbye, passport office. Goodbye, Department of Romantic Processes. Department of the Death Wish. Who you were can never meet who you are, can never meet who you'll be. In any case, horns should be blowing. This is galactic jazz, big bang sexy. You've always liked the idea that something larger, broader, plays you like an oboe, squeezing out your golden notes, an exotic scale worthy of prime time. Here's your defining moment, and this time you get the joke. There's no way to take credit. Don't be surprised if you feel relieved. The Department of Regrets has closed. The Department of Egoic Affairs has downsized. Even the Department of Transcendent Concerns has reduced its hours. Soon, that flurry of hammers, boarded panes, the clustering void and lull of atoms. Ancient solitude. Now your real work can begin. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Mind if I join you here? Well, hey there.
There we go.
How's it going?
Good,
So,
man.
that's great work, and we're going to talk about the book for in a little bit. But we met. You did a reading for me in Cambridge, Massachusetts, when this series was face to face. I would say it was 11 years before COVID in 2008, and that was 2 years before I got sober. So, what do you remember about that night? Because I don't remember much.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, I remember there were several readers, and I was trying to remember who was reading as well, and I can't remember that. I think Nathan Leslie might have read,
Yes, correct.
and I can't remember who else, but yeah, I remember a good crowd. I remember everything being pretty fast paced. You read, um, sold a few books, everything, cleared out pretty quickly. But yeah, I remember it was being, it was a good group.
So what have you been
Um,
up to from the last 16 years?
well,
Besides
uh,
writing a ton of books.
yeah, well, yeah, recovery is a big thing. Uh, Gosh, man, I don't know. Life keeps coming and you meet it and gauge with it the best you can. And yeah, writing and I guess I was married then. Okay, yeah, oh 08, I got married in 06. Um uh you know, been several animals that have come and gone since then, you
This after
know.
marriage? Oh, you meant pets.
Yeah, I mean pets, right? Yeah, cats, couple dogs. So yeah, a lot happens in what is that? 14 years?
16, but
16 years.
let's talk about what happens. So 2008, what percentage would you say of those poems you were writing in 2008 would come out of you today?
I remember what was I say, let's see, 2008. Um, I'd have to look, but I don't know. I don't really there's a couple poems from previous books that I occasionally go back to, but not much. Yeah, not much. I mean, either I don't relate to the space that they came from, or I feel that the craft isn't quite what I would want it to be now, you know? So one of those two things, but yeah, I don't tend to go back to those that much.
Do any of them go, when you go back, do any of them surprise you? Like, hey, this was pretty good. Because I mean, that happens with me sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I do like, uh, like like my first book came out in '04, I think it was. And I mean, when I read those poems, feel to me like they could be a little more polished or something like that. But I do like kind of that voice. There was kind of a wild voice or a reckless voice or a kind of just there were a lot of leaps and bounds and I don't know, like there was a rawness there that I do kind of like. Yeah. I think there was something to that even if some of the stylistic elements are a little cringy for me sometimes. Um, yeah, I do feel like that, like the voice was kind of compelling.
Now, when you read other writers that are newer and starting out, and then they advance and they lose that, I think all writers kind of lose that recklessness, that blissful ignorance. Um, do you miss that in other writers? Do you miss their young, carefree types of writing?
Sometimes I do, and I not to get off writing, but I definitely experience that with music, with people's, like a lot of debuts have a kind of audacity to them, and then things sometimes get a little more polished. I mean, even if all in all they might be progressing, yeah, there's kind of a and in that case, a lot of times it's just like those early records are young, we're talking about people in their 20s or something. But yeah, I think so with poems sometimes too. Yeah. It's a balance, I guess. There's a lot to be said for um it's kind of wild that it takes so long just to feel like you've made progress with using language. I mean, that doesn't seem like seems odd in some ways, but anyway, yeah, just rhythm, the like when you read like somebody who has a sense of rhythm, of music, of cadence, I mean, those kind of things are pretty compelling. And at the same time, sometimes the voice is quote more mature, whatever that means. And that can sort of, sometimes that can feel almost like kind of like there's a move toward a kind of conservative bearing or something like that.
Now, do you borrow from both compartments, your music and your poetry? In other words, have you ended up with a poem that started as a song that didn't work that way? And how about a poem that didn't work, it suddenly becomes lyrics to a song? Does that happen with you?
I haven't. I mean, I actually haven't been involved with music, with playing music in a while. I do a lot of music reviewing now, um, for different publications. So I'm really immersed in music as a listener and a kind of music journalist, I guess you could say. But in the past, I usually was pretty clear whether things were moving in a lyrical or direction or a poem. They felt like different processes to me in a way. I guess because lyrics, for me at least, were so tied to, a chord progression, like a melody, basically a melody. They were so tied to that, um, that I never really felt like the two, like there was confusion around which direction I was going in. They seem like very different processes.
So yes or no, you don't need to support your argument here, but is Bob Dylan a good poet as far as poetry is concerned?
Well, he's got some amazing images, and some amazing lines. I mean, I tend to think of his songs or his work as song oriented and dependent on melody and rhythm. Like when you take his lyrics out of the musical context, I don't think that they are as compelling overall, though there's no denying that there is a kind of there's certainly a poetic flair, man, in a lot of those lyrics.
Let's talk about Dark Survivors. Robert's got a question about the first poem that you read. When and there was dialogue in it. When and why would you use dialogue in a poem? What does it do?
Um, Let me consult that. Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know. I felt like with this poem anyway, you know, I'm not sure exactly how to answer it other than to say that the mother, the mix of like what's going on there, right? There's a death, there's a funeral, and sort of in the middle of all that is this dysfunction of like the father who can't express himself and the mother who's got all these superstitions, and in some ways is blaming the other son for for his brother's death. So it just felt like in this case to have her making that statement was more direct and more had more immediacy to it than if I tried to get at that in another way.
So this latest book, you write about your uncle who died of suicide, and there's a lot of loss in this book. Do poets get their ideas expedited through trauma and loss? Do you think that it produces a poem more easily?
Wow, that's a good question. I mean, it might. I mean, not always. I mean, I've always felt inclined to kind of mine. Well, I mean, first off, let me say, like a lot of trauma for people. I'm not trying to be over dramatic about it, but I mean,
course.
a lot of it does come out of family. I mean, even if it's not like, major trauma. I mean, most ruptures and things like that on a psychological level at least start with family. And then, I mean, there are other things that happen, but yeah, I've always felt that some of those fundamental ruptures, if you will, were worth mining. Um, so, but I mean, I'm not sure everybody works with that kind of content, obviously. But for me, I have felt that, yeah, that those kind of breaks um they're just where I have a lot of energy when it comes to writing. That's kind of just where juice is for me.
Do you get as much energy from other emotions?
Huh. Well, I'd like to get energy. I would like to get more energy from more emotions. Like I think I've been trying to write a so-called happy poem for a while, and I think I have touched on that some. It's not like um, sort of over the top kind of bliss or something, but I mean, I do think I've moved more into, I hope, into expressing an appreciation for beauty and for, some of the great, I mean, not gratitude head on, but implicitly.
Yeah, I understand that. One review of this book said that it started out you were getting into your uncle Richard Sassoon, and then it broadened. But that's the reader's perspective. Was it broad to begin with, or did you start with that one theme and then decide to branch it out into more family types of dynamics?
Yeah, it started off just with his death, but I mean, pretty quickly, and I didn't like plan this or anything, but it just quickly evolved into that it was working better to take different vantage points. So, like in some of the early poems, he is my uncle, but then quickly it became like I reconfigured that. Like in several poems, he's my brother. In a couple, he's like a friend, a childhood friend. I think in one, he's like a sort of mentor to this guy who's an aspiring photographer. You know what I mean? So anyway, he takes on a lot of different, he becomes a lot of different characters, and the quote I become a lot of different characters. So there are a lot of different relationships there, you know, but I do think one of the primary elements of the book is still trying to get at loss and family, and what, what the magic of relationships can be, and also what the pain in relationships can be.
Now, in the book, does anything appear as a persona poem? In other words, did he become you, and did you become him within the writing?
I haven't thought about it specifically like that. That's a good question. I do think now that you mention it that there are a couple poems where maybe that happens. Yeah. Or at least he becomes whoever he becomes very much the speaker. Um, so in that sense, yeah, there's kind of what one thing that occurred to me afterwards was that the theory of that theory about when you dream, all the people in your dream are you. I sort of thought about that later, actually. Like in some ways, all these characters in here, in a way, are probably part of the self in a sense. But yeah, I do think there's a lot of fluidity there and a lot of interchangeability and um, a lot of the boundaries around identity are kind of being erased.
Is there anything in your book that anyone in your extended family might find objectionable.
Yes, there probably is. Yeah, yeah. Or even people I grew up with. There was a guy who wrote me not that long ago, and there's a particular poem in there that references the town I grew up in, and which is also the town Nina Simone grew up in.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So anyway, I took Nina Simone's story and kind of everything is kind of filtered through an imagine is put through an imaginative or creative filter. And so he wrote me to tell me that I had gotten my history wrong, and this and that was and, and so I mean, I was aware that what I was writing was not history. It was what you would call creative liberty.
Right.
But yeah, so there are things. Yeah, there's definitely some stuff like that. And in
I'm
other
writing to
books.
you as a member of the Nina Simone fan club. I want you to
Yeah.
know that you kind of messed this up.
Yeah, and actually an earlier book, a lot of family now has kind of passed on, but earlier on there were some poems that I never really shared it with them, but it came around to them or something, or somebody shared it with them. I don't know how, but there were some things where there was some like a couple of family members were sort of bent out of shape about a couple things. Yeah.
There's a line in your book which the mumble patch where the old house used to stand. Now, mumble patch isn't really a word, correct? Did you invent that
Mm.
word? Do you invent words within your poems or other work?
I love your questions, man. I really do. That's a great question. Yeah. I grew up in the rural South, and one thing there is I love all the different names that I grew up with. Like all the different like different plants and trees and foods had all these interesting names. And my grandmother, I think loved all that too. And I think she started making up her own names for things like that. And so yeah, I sort of come from a line of people doing that. So I do make up words. Some of them I do remember being used. Just sort of these strange words that were part of that rural environment. So some of them are actually, based in previous use, but yeah, some of them are made up. I think Mumble Patch is probably made up.
I love it.
Yeah, I kind of like it too. Yeah, I know. Thanks.
Um, Tell me a little bit about the New York Quarterly Foundation.
Well, New York Quarterly started as a journal with William Packard was the founder in the probably late 60s, I guess. So he ran the journal. I forget exactly when he died and when Raymond Hammond became the editor, but so Raymond kept the journal going and then also created the press, New York Quarterly Books. Um, and that's been in place for, I don't know, 10 years plus. I'm not sure how many years. But anyway, yeah. So now, it's still the journal. I think it's quarterly, still. Um, and then they probably put out, I don't know, New York Quarterly probably puts out 10 to 12 books a year.
And let's close out with this. I saw that you posted something. You just won another prize, or was it a fellowship? What?
Oh yeah, man. Yeah, the
Good
Susan
for you.
Laughter Myers Fellowship. Yeah.
So what do you get for that?
Well, there's a little bit of money, which is kind of nice. Yeah, got some cash coming in on that one, and then it also involves a residency in a place called Weymouth, which is in Southern Pines, North Carolina. It's about I don't know, 2 hours. I'm in Charlotte. It's about 2 hours from here. So there's an old house that was built around early 1900s. Basically, it's kind of like a Biltmore guy came, the Biltmore family. Well, it's a similar thing, but they came to visit here and they fell in love with the area. So they built this huge thing out in the middle of nowhere, brought all these materials in from God knows where. So anyway, part of this is that receive this honorarium, and then you get I think it's a week, or you can have 2 weeks at different, a week at a time or whatever. It's 2 weeks total residency at this place called Weymouth.
And is that like in the middle of near the Smoky Mountains?
No, it's the opposite direction. Yeah, that's more like Asheville. Yeah, that's more sort of northwest. This is kind of east.
Well, John, I really appreciate you coming on and reading and talking to us. And here's the book.
Yeah.
You don't have to remember, you don't have to buy it on Amazon, but that's where it is. It's a 3 month old. It was birthed in May of this year. And check out John and all of his other books. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, you're welcome, man. I'll put these links in here real quick.
Okay.
Um,
And
so
for
there you
folks
go.
watching the live stream, and that's johnamen.net and New York Quarterly, nyq.org, book titled Dark-Souvenirs. And folks watching the stream, thank you for watching. If you want to come in for the open mic, use the link. I will gladly let you in. Our next dire is with Jackie Corley. It's a special Friday on September 6th. And for this season's videos, you can either check out my blog. They'll be going live, every one that I've had for the summer. And also, as they say in YouTube land, subscribe. Hit that little
Mm,
button that
hmm.
says subscribe. That just drives me crazy. But anyway, thank you so
Yeah.
much, John. Thanks,
Yeah,
everybody,
thank
for
you,
watching.
Tim. I appreciate it, man. It was great.